Hello, and welcome to the Scott Mize Show, a podcast focused on body and hormone optimization and improvement for anyone who's looking to get jacked, build muscle, lose fat, improve their hormones, feel better, or improve their health. Here, I interview experts in lab work, hormones, bodybuilding, coaches, bodybuilders, and everyday people and senior executives who have improved their hormones and improved their body. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Anything you hear should not be taken as medical advice. Please consult with your physician before making any changes to your diet, exercise, or supplementation protocols. This podcast is brought to you by Element Electrolytes. Element Lemonade is finally here. It's great for a hot summer day, workout, or just enjoying with a cold beverage at your desk. Check it out and get your free sample pack of their favorite flavors, along with any regular purchase when you use my custom link, which is drinklmnt.com/Scott Mize. The sample pack is great for anyone who's interested in trying their most popular flavors, or anyone who wants to introduce a friend to Element. Go to drinklmnt.com/Scott Mize to claim this awesome deal. Now on to the show. Dave Canney is a bodybuilder and bodybuilding coach and former record-setting wide receiver at Assumption University. He still holds the Greyhounds single-season reception record of 86 and game record of 16 catches set in 2010. After college, he swapped shoulder pads for posing trunks, earned top placings at the 2023 NPC, while building blue-collar bodybuilding with his wife Jackie, a coaching brand YouTube channel that spotlights hardworking, no-frills training and their shared journey of sobriety and personal growth. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So that Dave Canney is a different one, the football player. I did play football my whole life growing up, but it's funny, if you look up my name, there's a couple of us Dave Canneys that played ball in the area.
Oh, that's funny. We'll leave it in because it's funny, but that's what ChatGPT came up with.
Close. I was a running back, not a receiver. I was too stout and chubby for that to be catching the ball.
Nice.
Yeah.
Was that in Boston, or where did you play?
No, I played at the Westford Academy.
Oh, cool.
In Massachusetts, and just grew up my whole life doing that. I wrestled, throughout high school, and football, and that was about the extent of my time. I did a little bit of basketball, but it wasn't my sport. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So let's talk about your journey and your story. How did you get into bodybuilding, and maybe like where were you before that shifted you into that world?
Yeah. Well, so I at a young age kind of grew up quick. So I had lived on my own since I was about 16 years old. So I kind of put myself with my sister through high school, and kind of just was working a ton, and kind of stopped playing football my senior year because I was trying to keep a roof over my head, and but to keep myself in shape and keep myself moving along with my spare time, I kind of fell in love with the gym part of training. I always enjoyed sport, but I really kind of gravitated toward the gym, as a little bit more of something that was much more stress relieving. I mean, I like playing on teams and stuff like that, but I kind of like the responsibility being all on my own. So I kind of just got into it just by, looking to get in a little bit better shape. I was kind of like a big, stocky, kind of a pudgy kid growing up, got picked on it a little bit. Didn't really enjoy that. And when I moved on my own, I started training a lot. And then after a while, I actually, part of my past is I kind of developed an addiction problem that I struggled with for about 10 years. So I kind of was in and out of the gym. The gym would be kind of when I was sober, it'd be like my safe haven to keep myself kind of on, keep the train on the tracks, so to speak. And then when I'd fall off, it would pretty much I'd blow back up to a 300-pound fatty and just get myself into a position where I had to start all over again. Unfortunately, from when I was like 18 to about probably 10 years, probably 28, 29, I kind of went through that cycle of alcoholism, for a couple of years, and then I'd straighten myself out back and forth. And eventually I just got to the point where I just had enough. I went and seek some help. My wife helped me out quite a bit. I owe a lot to Jackie, who you might know as well. She competes, and she's an IFBB pro herself and coaches with me. So I finally got my life straightened out. It'll be 5 years sober in October. And that's kind of really was where it all began, was I enjoyed the gym, but it was kind of really my tool to use to keep myself sober and keep myself kind of occupied and kind of actually teach myself to kind of appreciate my own body. And then the sport of bodybuilding was just kind of something that ran parallel that I enjoyed, at the same time. I wasn't really much of a person to enjoy CrossFit or kind of like any endurance sports. I really kind of liked the bodybuilding because it was just all encompassing. You're paying attention not to just what you're doing in the gym, but outside the gym, I had to stay occupied, so I mentally had to be engaged with my diet, recovery, just taking care of yourself in general, just having something in the back of your mind to keep you motivated towards a goal. So the bodybuilding part kind of fell in line, and it worked great because if you really think about it, staying sober is like a daily thing that you have to kind of pay attention to, but you have this long-term goal of sobriety. And the same thing kind of applies with bodybuilding. You're really just doing one good day at a time, trying to accumulate years of building your physique so you can continue to progress in the sport. So they ran pretty parallel for me. But I really truly fell in love with bodybuilding when I first saw my first pictures of an actual bodybuilder. I saw those famous pictures of Dorian Yates in the black and white, just in his shorts, just throwing up a front double bicep, and I just never seen anything like it. And I just told myself, if I could be 10% of that someday, I would be happy. So that kind of got me into the sport. And then my wife got into the sport as well, just kind of started training. I remember her first day where she was 98 pounds, if that. She called herself skinny fat at 98 because she was a little soft at the time. And she was, thin and small. Now she's about 140 pounds, competes at like 130, 132 or so, I think was her last stage weight. So we just got into that together. It's something we shared a lot of, enjoyment together. We talked about a lot. And I just started to eventually just kind of obsess with the nutrition aspect of things. So I kind of fell in love with trying to figure out the knowledge of, how nutrition really applies, and it applies to the sport. And we kind of all know as bodybuilders, and yourself, that the better you are with your diet, that's 70% of the progress is my opinion. I'd say 70% of the progress you get from bodybuilding is really your diet and how well you apply it. So I wanted to have everything to my advantage. So I just started reading over years and researching and just trying this diet, that diet, experimenting on myself with different kind of tactics and stuff like that. And then I was getting some success, looking a lot better. I'd drop a ton of weight. I'd get, I have an easy time kind of putting on muscle, so I'd kind of fill out pretty easily. Then people would just start asking me for a little bit of advice, and then it started kind of evolving into I'd help a few people. I helped kind of train Jackie and coach her. And then before you know it, you fast forward, we're coaching a ton of people, professionally, doing that quite well, running a pretty good little business out of it as well. And we enjoy it. We run 5 different businesses together between Jackie and I, but this is one that's really just like a passion project that turned into, a good pay as well. And it's something that we're hoping to just kind of prioritize and live off of and down the road, and just kind of take advantage of being young and getting to do a sport that will put some money in our pocket, but also at the same time kind of live a dream. She gets to travel and be a professional bodybuilder. I'm working my way up, hopefully one day to have an opportunity to get a card myself.
I'm sure.
So it'd be pretty cool. My overall goal down the road is her and I stepped on our first stage together, years ago for our first amateur show.
When was that?
That was like 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
4 years ago now. So, and of course she's a freak. She won the overall, her first show. She won the whole show. Then the next 3 weeks later, she won the New England Championships in the overall.
Wow.
And then she went to the universe and won the universe and turned pro. So, which, as we all know, is pretty rare. But yeah, so we're just kind of trying to take advantage of being, in our mid 30s and see if we can do a little traveling and make some money at it. And that's really how I got to the point I am today. And now I love every aspect of it. I train a lot of good people and coach them, and it's enjoyable. It's definitely gratifying.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I listen to you all the time on the Anabolic Bodybuilding Live, and what really comes through is how much you care about your clients and also your intellectual curiosity. You're always talking about new things you're researching or asking questions, trying to learn from others, and I really respect that.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned when I was younger, that the second you think you know it all, you know really nothing. You have to be kind of in a pursuit for knowledge all the time. Yeah. And I'm lucky where I got hooked in with Paul some years back. And it's kind of funny. I had during some of my research about bodybuilding, I came across Justin Harris and his teachings. And I really kind of gravitated towards his strategy, his, carb cycling approach and this and that. And through him, I kind of saw Paul. And I actually just kind of thought personality-wise, Paul and I got along pretty well. So I reached out to him, had him coach me for a few years. And now he's one of my best friends. He comes down to our house all the time. I go down to his place. And he's good. I'm fortunate to have some good people around me in that circle that I can continue to learn from.
Yeah. Yeah. That's no better people to surround yourself with. And yeah, I really, really respect you for congratulations on 5 years sober. It's really impressive.
Yeah. Thank you.
I won't say I was an alcoholic, but I probably did multiple lifetimes worth of drinking from age 18 to 22 and pretty much cut it out after that. It's been about 8 or so years since I've had any alcohol.
Oh, wow.
Feel pretty good about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just one of those where my scenario was, where I lived on my own since I was 16 and I was, renting a home. I bought my first house at 18.
Wow.
I had a lot going on really early. But I had started a few businesses and they were really successful, but I was putting in, 80, 90 hours a week, 7 days a week for years on end, years and years on end, never a day off other than maybe Christmas or like 4th of July week. We would always take 7 days off for that. And that was it. So I was using alcohol to really just I'd go home, I'd get dinner in, have a couple drinks, and then start drinking too much to just kind of cope with relaxing. It would help me just kind of settle in, grab my laptop, and just keep working, and just kind of numb the grind and the rigor of it all.
Yeah, that's so tough to break those habits.
Yeah. And then it just eventually caught up to the point where it was just no good for me physically, and I just decided I had to make a change. So I'm lucky I never really, I guess you could say, hit rock bottom where I was always able to pay my bills. I was always able to pursue goals and I was there for family. But in the long run, it just wasn't where I wanted to be. And I guess everything happens for a reason. It ended up turning out just fine.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. It's amazing with addiction. Like there's so many factors that go into it, but it feels like some of the strongest pieces are habits and routine and who you're surrounded by. Like when I was in college, I was on the rowing team. I started rowing in 8th grade. I was a competitive lightweight rower. I was recruited to college for rowing. I rowed there and we had to be sober for the competitive season. And then outside of that, every weekend it was not drink to have fun, but drink to black out as quickly as possible. And I had some scares, I'll say, during that time. I'm glad to be rid of that. But I had to basically distance myself from those friends because their priority was getting as drunk as possible. That's how they interacted socially. And it's tough to be around those types of people when your values change. Yeah.
I was fortunate not to have many bad influences as much as myself was the bad influence. But it was just something that it just creeps up on you too. Like if you're not paying attention to, like you say, the people that you're surrounding yourself, it's pretty easy to just fall in line and not, go down the wrong path for sure. So yeah, it's good that you recognize that for sure. And what my key is I tried getting sober about 3 different times over those 10 years when I was struggling with drinking. And it wasn't really until I actually accepted that I needed help from others. Like we're all strong individuals. We all get a strong will. Pursuing goals is something that, I thrive in, but I needed to actually step out and say to my family, like, hey, I do have a problem. I need to, talk to you guys. I need some help. I'm not going to do this on my own. And this is what I need from you. And that was a huge thing for me because I was always one to just say, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. You guys don't worry about nothing. Because I was able to do that with every other facet of life, business and whatnot. So that definitely helped, which was just not being afraid to ask for help and say, hey, I need some support. This is going to be a rough go for me.
Yeah, that takes a ton of courage. I can't imagine how hard that was. And the term blue collar, like, what does that mean to you? You talked about working 90-hour weeks, kind of serial entrepreneur, but how did you come up with that? And what does it mean to you?
Yeah, well, it was funny. It didn't take us long when Jackie and I decided to put a name to our bodybuilding business was coming up with blue collar, because that's really what our family's blue collar families, in the sense of, they all work some sort of trade or physical job. A business I had for about 15 years, and I just sold actually this spring. I finally got out of, was a trucking industry and a landscape business. So, but we also did, we produced our own, we had huge screening plants that we would produce our own topsoils and custom compost that people would be trucking in 10-wheelers in bulk product, basically. So there was a lot of just blue collar, get your hands dirty, fix your own equipment, coming home sunburned, dirty face all the time. And, it wasn't a desk job. So it was really, we kind of learned that our work ethic was blue collar, and anything we wanted to do, we had to kind of pay for it in the sweat off our back, so that name just kind of stuck well, and it applies to bodybuilding. I tell all my clients that, your goals, the cost that's going to cost you to achieve your goals is always going to be fair. So if not, everyone would do it. If it was easier than you expected, everyone would do it, and no one would get it done if the cost was too much, So the time that you put into these things, the effort, the blood, sweat, and tear that really is, it's a blue collar pursuit, and you have to work for it, earn it physically, and no one can do it for you. So that name, blue collar bodybuilding, just kind of emphasized, we're here to work, we're here to help each other and make it happen and teach you along the way, and not be ashamed of, getting your hands dirty to get it done. And once you accept that, you're going to have a lot easier pursuit of your goals.
Absolutely. What's the hardest or worst blue collar job you've had?
Oh, geez. I'd just say sometimes, well, I'll give you an example. Like in our trucking industry, we were kind of in the position where everything had to be done by the owner too. So I'm scoring the jobs. Some days I'm going to have to be driving the truck. Some days I'm going to be underneath it all day long, fixing it with grease up to my elbows. So it's really, I guess the toughest part is just acquiring the knowledge to make everything work, to be able to be the swingman. But and there's been some tough days where I've been out with my men, working right beside them, digging holes to plant new landscapes with them by hand in 100-degree weather, and, just the real physical, vigorous kind of job. So, but I remember definitely a few times where the elements and the weather would beat the crap out of you.
Yeah.
And it's just tough, but
it's the heat for sure.
Yeah, but I've done a little bit of it all. I remember growing up doing everything from washing dishes to, my father built houses for 30 years with my Uncle Mark. So, I got the opportunity to learn the a little bit of everything from digging the cellar hole in the excavation sense to shingling the roof, So there's a lot of good and bad, but it's all physical. It's just at the end of the day, you only got so much gas in the tank,
Yep. Yeah. I had a summer. I've been fortunate that I haven't had to do a ton of blue collar work, but I had a summer where I was just trying to pick up odd blue collar jobs, and man, the heat really just amplifies everything.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And as you know, New England, you don't know what to expect. You wake up and you could think it's going to be a beautiful day and it's going to be the hottest, or it's going to be raining and miserable. You never know.
Yeah. I remember my rowing friend had this older friend who was a serial entrepreneur and lived in Brookline, and he would flip houses and stuff like that. And I think the business he had was flipping boats. So he would buy cheap boats, sand them down, repaint them, all this stuff. And I remember one day, just 100+, middle of August, and we were, scraping the paint off these boats and then trying to repaint it, and just the fumes and the heat, it was just rough.
I bet. Yeah. Yeah. That's how you learn, you got to try some of these different, diversify your skills too. That's the good thing about some of these blue collar jobs is you can take them home and use them, some of these skills you learn, you got your door that's creaking. You've learned how to fix it yourself. You want to go do something in the backyard, make a little patio, you know how to go about it, so there's definitely some benefits to it. Right now, me trying to adjust to working on a computer is different for me, quite a bit. My little bit of the YouTube game with the, coaching and just communication and spreadsheets. That was just one facet of my job. Now it's the whole part. For me, that's a little different. I find myself just wanting to get out of the house just to go run an errand, just jump in my truck,
Yeah. I get that. It's definitely a transition.
Yeah, absolutely.
And talk us through your 2023 season. What was that like? What went well? What adjustments are you making for the next prep?
For myself or for coach?
For you.
Coach? Oh, okay. Well, let's see. So you mean last year, 2023?
Did you compete last year?
I competed last year and then the year before.
Okay. Yeah. Talk about both.
Yeah. Well, so pretty much it would have been our first. So this will be my third competitive season.
Okay.
So my first year, my wife and I decided we were finally going to just, we coached people and put people on stage for years before we actually did our own show prep and decided to compete ourselves. Not that it wasn't a goal. We just ended up staying very busy putting other people on stage and just building our own physique. Yeah. But we just decided one time, let's get it done and do it ourselves. We know we want to do it. What better time than now? So my first competitive season, I was competing in the light heavyweights in bodybuilding and men's bodybuilding. I knew that my shape and structure just wasn't going to look the best for classic, so I never even really tried to fit into that group. But I remember stepping on stage at about 191 pounds on my first show. I was definitely peeled to the bone and over dieted. I was one of those who did just a little bit more than I needed to. But that was good. That was a good learning experience. I got I think I got a second place and like a fourth place in the East Coast Cup. And then the same I got a fourth place in the New Englands. And then last year, I ended up when I competed, I went from 191 to like 208. So wow. I had a pretty good jump in stage weight.
Nice.
And then I was competing in the heavyweights. So that was a little bit of a jump for me, of course, moving up a weight class. But that was a good season for me. I ended up getting a second place in East Coast Cup and then the same thing last year in the New England. So my goal this year is to stay in the heavyweights and try to just win both shows. So I haven't done the national show yet. I just kind of have a personal goal of winning these two local shows first.
Awesome.
Because those are kind of big in New England, the bigger shows for the NPC. But everything went well. Like all the tactics I kind of learned, and Paul did a great job coaching me. You know, the toughest part for me was just kind of learning to be patient myself in practicing what I preach to my clients. Like, you know, you're not going to get shredded from week 16, 15 weeks out. You know, it's a process leading up to the show. So I had to learn patience quite a bit because I just wanted everything to get done right away. You know, and I kind of got a good humbling experience with how well some guys present on stage. And that was something that I took in personally and decided that I have to make sure that that's something I really, really push forward with my clients is presentation. Yeah. You know, I was definitely admit my first show, I was one that didn't pose well. I mean, I posed well for my first time, but not as well as I knew I could have applied myself.
Yeah.
So I made some of those adjustments and I thought I did an excellent job really becoming a good poser in a year's time. So I'm hoping this year, all those little lessons I learned from getting my butt whooped the first couple of years will kind of translate to now to have a really acceptable package on stage. So I'll be competing. I just started prep like 2 weeks ago. I say started prep. I usually do like a 4-week kind of like break. And then 16 weeks out, we really start diving into the prep. So I got 17 weeks out, I think it is. And then like 19 weeks out until I step on stage because I'm going to do 2 shows again this year.
Is that like October timing or?
Yeah, it'd be like the beginning of October and then the very end.
Cool.
So yeah, I'm hoping to just see if I can, you know, I should be able to stay in the heavyweights. I put on a ton of muscle this off season. That's always kind of been an easy part for me is really growing. So I'm just hoping to just continue to improve. I think that the one thing that they wanted me to do from judging feedback was just bigger quads and a little bit wider back. My conditioning's always on point. That's something that just kind of comes easy to me is getting in shape. So yeah, and I got my posing down. I'm really comfortable with that. And we'll see how we do.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. And what has your approach to training been? You mentioned getting inspired early by Dorian Yates. So I imagine your first foray may have been higher intensity, but how has that evolved, or is that where you started?
Well, it's funny. The first bodybuilder I saw, was Dorian Yates when I saw those pictures, his famous black and white photos. But when I started to learn when I started doing some research and experimenting with myself with training, I actually gravitated more towards, I guess what everyone would say would be like Jay Cutler's kind of approach. Cool. I was pretty beat up at a young age from a lot of sports. You know, my knees are a little messed up and my hips a little screwed up. So I was a strong guy. I knew I was strong because of my work. You know, I was always one of the stronger guys. I could do whatever I need to do when it came to the strength department. But I started learning that I seemed to change quicker and get more out of my diet with these higher volume approach. So I pretty much try to start as a method for myself. I work kind of just within a rep range as my goal. So I'll say that most of my exercises, I'm going to work from like a 12 to 20 rep range, and I judge my weight within there.
Okay.
So I'm pretty much progressing my reps up to, let's say, 12 to 15. Once I can do 15 of a certain weight, that's when I progress my load intensity. I never really chase the weight, and I've found that all I do is just get injured. My form starts to slack when we chase weight. You know, a lot of people are really just looking for that number in the logbook rather than the result in the mirror. So I really gravitated towards that. And it was just a lot easier on my joints. I seemed to get a lot rounder. I liked the way that training kind of gave my look. I recovered better. I recovered more predictably. So I kind of did a lot more volume training for sure. And I do now a push-pull leg. I started off doing like a bro split, I guess you'd call it.
Okay.
One body part per day. But I started over probably the past 3 years when I started working with Paul, trying just push, pull, leg with the higher volume approach. And that's pretty much been my Goldilocks zone so far. I've really been trying to master that and just letting strength progress on its own. You know, just naturally, not driven and forced. Because again, I'm a stickler for form too. I teach a lot of my clients. I'm constantly, even on the guys that have been working with me for years, they still send me weekly videos. We still check form. We still try to make 100% out of every movement pattern we can. And it's not just for the performance, it's for the longevity of things. You know, after a while, we kind of like accept that a certain movement might hurt, or it might be too much, fatigue versus the stimulus, and we just kind of accept it because we fall in love with a certain movement. So like a lot of guys, I found myself taking out some of those movements. I don't do any barbell squats. I don't do any deadlifts off the floor. You won't see me doing a bench press with a barbell any longer because it's just like 1 out of every 10 sets I'm getting some sort of tweak or injury, no matter how well I try to get the form down. But yeah, that's been my style. It's definitely a higher volume approach. I do coach some different athletes. Like I have some college football players I coach. So obviously they have a different need. We have some power lifters and strongmen that we coach. So they have a different kind of requirement for their training. But for bodybuilding wise, I've always just gravitated towards as much volume as I can recover has been best for me through good form.
Yeah.
Through good form. And then once form breaks down for me, I'm done for the day. You know, once I can't do anything with reasonable form, I'm pretty much done. So most of my exercises are going to be stuff like say if we're working chest, I'm pretty much going to be getting like 8 working sets, maybe for the chest, maybe 4 for delts or scenario. And that's really about it. High reps on that. And every once in a while, Jackie, like I train with my wife quite a bit. Some days we get to line up and actually have fun. So we'll train together, and we might pick a movement where we say, hey, let's just try to get 6 reps. You know, there's a T-bar row. We're feeling it. It's fun. Let's try to just have fun. So that's the other side of the coin is I have to have my training a little bit enjoyable and fun. It can't be all work all the time. You know what I mean? Or you fall out of love with it. It just doesn't work as much. You know, mind over matter is definitely a thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that approach a lot. It's similar to me. I've experimented different types of training. I think universal for me is, you know, good form. And I think it's very easy also to hammer yourself into the ground to the point that it's not productive on a given exercise or a given set in terms of like whether you do high volume, low volume, high reps, low reps. I think like going past failure, quote unquote, which isn't really even a thing, that just doesn't make a lot of sense. You're just adding like a ton of fatigue. I think that's been the biggest thing for me that I've learned over the years is like, you're just not getting much, like you're increasing injury risk. You're really setting yourself up for bad recovery if you do that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what you see. After a while, once you get into those realms of like forced failure, your ability to recover just drops off the cliff. You start adding big chunks of time that you need to recover from. I just don't think that's necessary because this sport's really a marathon more.
Yep.
You're not going to get everything done in one day of training. So you need to be able to plot out training blocks. You need to be able to foresee yourself progressing over a period of time, not just how can I beat the crap out of myself in one day. You know, Dr. Mike Isertel, I tried to take a little bit of knowledge from everyone in his discussions of what they call MRV, maximum recoverable volume. is something I take to the bank for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're able to find what that is for you, so that might be different for Scott versus myself versus my wife or, other people. But once you find how much can I do optimally and recover and then get back, in 2 or 3 days and train this again, you start again finding these Goldilocks zones of progress that are just, you're picking up time. And that's what we're trying to do, is get a rate of progress at the end of the day, so
Yep.
you're not trying to spend a year to get 50% of the results. You're trying to get 100% out of it in a year's time. So that's also kind of a way you need to zoom out and look at the whole scenario with people. So when I put their training together, I might start really slow, and see how much more they can handle. And then you quickly find their biofeedback will talk to you and tell you that they're just not recovering. We found that spot, or maybe we need to move things around and have a different approach. But you're chasing just, that rate of gain as optimally as possible and as quickly you can turn it over is the way I try to look at it for sure.
Yeah, the one way I like to describe it to clients, especially like younger clients who are a bit impatient, is it's like growing a plant, like growing a tree. You have sunshine, you have water, you have the soil, training, PDs, diet, and you just need to like give it the ingredients and give it time to an extent. And, you can't flood it with water or, pound it over the head with sunshine or whatever. It just needs time, and you need to like basically create this environment where everything is working and it's like, stacking up wins, compounding interest in a sense.
Yeah. You got to set yourself up for a trajectory to succeed too. So like you need to kind of learn to start small and work within your own capabilities as well. Like this fits for just not training, but it's also diet. It's also the PED usage. It's also how well does your lifestyle and job fit your recoverability and rest as well.
Yeah.
Like give an example, like if we were to look at the PED realm, if your goal is to be Ronnie Coleman one day, why are you on day one going to start with his cycle? Just at this. So some people might say, well, that's going to give me a lot of results, but you can also backtrack and it looks a lot easier. The example fits a lot better when I say, well, if you want to look like Ronnie Coleman, that's fine. Why don't you try squatting 800 pounds on your day one? People will go, well, I can't do that. I got to work up to it.
Great point.
And so if you start understanding like working up and building up to these things, that makes a lot of sense in my mind too.
Yeah.
So that comes along with the patience and learning to get the most out of a little, and all these things start to fall in place. The ship kind of sails itself at some point.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And when you're doing your push-pull legs, that's 6 days a week you're usually training?
No, I do 5. So
Okay.
I take 2 days off in a row. I'll take Saturday and Sunday off, and I work Monday through Friday with the training. So I usually just do different blocks where I only have 1 day of like right now I'm doing 2 pushes, 1 pull, and 2 leg days.
Got it.
Okay. So then I'll pretty much get that to a point where maybe it's 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and then it's time to maybe switch things up and add in, take out 1 pull session, 1 push session, and put in the second pull. So I'll kind of rotate that way. 6 days a week I did for a while. I did 3 on, 1 off for years as well. But I found 2 straight days of recovery is just perfect for me. And it fits my lifestyle. It fits everything. It's predictable for me. So that tends to work. And it's actually funny. Some people start to learn that actually dialing back some of their training, they tend to grow a little better. Like my wife is a perfect example of someone who went from 6 days a week training to 5 to 4 days a week. She'll do Monday and Tuesday and then Thursday, Friday. And she grows like a weed that way. For some reason, that actual extra recovery gives her more out of her training, especially having just 2 full days on, 1 day off, and then 2 days off over the weekend.
Yeah.
So that's also part of learning yourself too, because again, you always think more is better. Well, it depends on the application.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your coaching, do you have a lot of not older, but not 20-year-olds, like 30, 40, 50-year-old guys as well?
Yeah. So we coach, I'd probably say 60, 2/3 of our clients are competitive bodybuilders. And then the other third is pretty much lifestyle. It could be a soccer mom that just wants to drop 60, some weight for her daughter's wedding. She wants to look good for an event. And then again, we do have other athletes, college football players. We actually have a few of those, and power lifters, but we do have actually in the bodybuilding realm, a lot of masters competitors. I'd say probably half of them are 40 plus of the people we coach. So
cool.
For some reason, Jackie and I get along pretty well. We're kind of like old souls ourselves a little bit to a point.
Yeah.
And we relate to them well. But yeah, I've had good success with a lot of masters competitors, and I just recently put one of my closer clients on stage in Rhode Island for Rhode Island.
Cool.
Just had that big their big show that they just revitalized, which was an excellent show. And he did great. I like working with the masters competitors because it's kind of different. Like, some of us will be honest, we're a little over the hill after a certain age, and it comes quick. Once you get to 35, 40, your ability in bodybuilding kind of slows down, your rate of progress. But man, a lot of not trying to just paint them all with a broad brush, but a lot of the masters guys just are very simple. And the women that we coach, masters competitors, they just do as you say very, very well. They have good educated questions. They're kind of past that learning curve as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And when you have, on the lifestyle side, when you have older folks come to you, you mentioned like soccer moms, or maybe it's working professionals, men or women, like what are some of the things that you do differently? And like, how do you, I guess what I'm trying to ask is like, what do you think is necessary for those types of people to get results versus a competitive bodybuilder?
Yeah. Well, I try to be big on educating a lot of people. So like, I want my lifestyle person to understand the scheme we're going for just as much as the competitive athlete. But so like once they're able to understand basic things like deficits, like recovery, what that means, like between your rest and your actual output in the gym, those are huge. So I kind of have like these bottom level things I require people to learn to a point. They need to be able to count macros and learn certain things. So I expect that out of a bodybuilder, of course, just as much as I expect that out of a lifestyle person. But in terms of like different tactics, I mean, we all know what a bodybuilding diet looks like as well as training. But for someone like, we'll use like the soccer mom that wants to shape up in 6 months, we might, instead of doing an elaborate diet of different macronutrients, we could just start some people with baby steps with just like a protein goal that we suffice every day, and a calorie goal we don't go over every day. So if her goal is to lose 20 pounds in 6 months, we're going to set a training day calorie goal and a protein goal as like a bottom level thing that we have to do. And so their diets might be more simple, just in the idea of just thermodynamics, like making sure they understand calories in, calories out.
Yeah.
And then training, it's flexible. Some people can only work out at home in their basement with 2 dumbbells they have in 1 resistance band. You have to find ways to make it work. What's really different is just kind of working with what they're capable of, what kind of amount of time they're willing to put in it. Where bodybuilders or competitive athletes, I'm expecting more of you. Like if you're going to be in the competitive realm, you have to have a gym membership. You have to be able to have certain abilities to check different health metrics. We're going to know what your blood pressure is. We're going to know what, blood glucose levels are. We're going to get certain things, checked off, certain boxes checked. So I guess it's really, I can make do with less with some lifestyle clients, as long as we have some small kind of laws we put in place.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. And, with older clients, have you ever like helped people start TRT or like help them with their hormones for the first time? And what has that been like?
Honestly, most of the older competitors or older people that I've worked with, if they're on TRT, I usually try to get them to work with a clinic that they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I kind of am more comfortable working in the competitive realm when it comes to PEDs, but I haven't necessarily started anyone myself and self-prescribed, because I can't obviously not self-prescribe them, but I haven't really started that process for them other than getting them. There's plenty of good referrals of clinics around us. Obviously in this world, you and I know a bunch of different connections of people that are going to do a much better job, and that'll be their focus. People like Ryan, Joe Miller's been one I've worked with quite a bit. So those people can do a really good job as well. So I try to let me work on their diet, work on their gym performance. And if they need advice, I'm always there to help them with that or look over blood work with them. But I try to steer that. I'll be honest, I try to steer that towards them just having, if it's just TRT and we're not doing any competitive trickery, I'd suggest they usually go to a clinic that they trust.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's
because there's so many good ones nowadays, and a lot of these guys, they do a good job, and they just have they're always on the cutting edge of things. There's so much that's always coming out that unless you really keep up with it, you'd be lying to say that you're on top of everything that's coming out, all the knowledge that's coming out.
Totally. I think That's really smart of you and mature of you in terms of like scope of practice, especially for lifestyle people, to refer them to the experts.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's easy to suggest it though. Like if you see someone's blood work because they want to take a look at it, it's pretty obvious sometimes when you've seen their hormone panels. If you say, hey, did you ever consider maybe reaching out to a men's clinic or health clinic? Because this is what I see. I see that you're low here. Your biofeedback tells me that energy is always low. Your metabolism's a little slow. So sometimes you can at least push them in that direction and then let the clinics go from there.
Yep. Agreed. And shifting a little bit to yourself as a competitor, what have you found to work well for you in terms of PEDs, both off season and contest prep, and maybe how has that evolved over time as well?
Yeah. Yeah. So like everyone else, when I was younger, I tried every GNC pro hormone and, some of the SARMs when they came out when I was much younger. But what I've really gravitated to is, and I've learned everyone's different. That's for sure. So certainly what works for me isn't always going to work for everyone else. But I've kind of found out that a lot of the basics work for me. Like I always start everything with a testosterone base for myself, and that's my driving anabolic for sure. And then I'll add in something like I've had very good success with just the testosterone and primo or testosterone and EQ. But I try to get, again, same approach, get the most out of the least. So like in the off seasons, I really am a big fan of after the show, trying to get my gear a little bit lower so I can let the food do its magic. Yep. And then I'll just progress my dosages throughout the off season. So if I see that my body composition is looking good, and we're 3 months into an off season, but I'm hitting a wall of progress, I might bump the food. Or the other way around, if I'm not looking so good and I feel like, hey, it's not a food thing that I need, I might bump the anabolics up a little bit. But for specifics, I'm huge on staying off of orals other than, I've seen too much blood work of my own and other people to see that there's an application for each compound. And a lot of these orals, I think people abuse in the off season because they're a lot of fun to take Anadrol in the off season. I'll tell you that much. But it does wreak havoc on you and it's usually never like, oh, I'll just do it for a week or two. It becomes part of their stack. So, and I made those mistakes when I was younger. Luckily had no big damage, but you could see trends on the blood work where it wasn't going to head in the right direction. So I try to stick with, testosterone, growth hormone, and one anabolic throughout my off season, keep it simple. Smart. I can manage a lot of health variables and make a ton of progress that way. And then when it comes to the blood glucose levels, I'll usually use something like a metformin or berberine, but also even insulin if needed. Because I'm one of those that eat a ton of food. Like my off season can be 1,200 grams of carbs 3 times a week. It's insane amounts of food. Yes, yeah. You know what I mean. So that you have to, by default, pay attention to what's going on because you might be able to handle the food, but can your pancreas handle the, excreting all that insulin as well?
Yeah, I'm lucky there. I got up to 7,000 calories every single day in the off season. Wow. And the low days, there were no low days. I'll say that. And I didn't use insulin, and my fasting blood glucose waking up was like in the 60s. Mm-hmm. So my pancreas is on steroids or something. I don't know what to say. Very strong.
That's good. And it's good to know that for sure, because that's one thing you don't want to, people think this is hard, paying attention to blood glucose levels, paying attention to your health. But, it's so true. What's harder is living with diabetes when you're older and all the BS that comes with it. So, but then again, there is an application for certain things. So like in showtime, I'll use orals towards the end, usually like an Anavar or whatnot. I've definitely come full circle around on 2 different things. And one is that you don't need tren for every show. I've come to learn that because I don't handle it well. Like, I don't really have many health problems other than like sleep hygiene issues. Like I just never can sleep, get the night sweats. So I've come to the point where I usually don't use more than like 20 milligrams. The last 2 shows, I used about 20 milligrams a day.
Wow.
So about 140 a week. And that did the perfect trick for me.
Oh, nice.
But those days of doing 300, 400, 500 is just not going to happen any longer. And then one thing I've translated from my own use to a lot of my clients is, which I think we all overlook, is how much we beat up our CNS with stimulant use on the show preps. A lot of people use things, caffeine, like the old ECY stacks, caffeine, yohimbine, ephedra, clenbuterol. All those things are fine, and there's an application for it for sure. but that's a lot of stimulus to your CNS, and that's only sustainable for so long. That's like trying to run your engine of your car on ether. You'll get the thing running, and it'll run really good, really for a short period of time, though. So I've learned to try to back off on that stuff, use only like the limited minimal amount needed. And actually, the last guy I just prepped, we didn't use anything other than we used some of that SLU peptide. And that was it. That was it.
Yeah.
Zero fat burners involved. And he was one of the most shredded people on stage.
That's really impressive.
Yeah. So like I've come to find like that's one tactic I've definitely had to learn the hard way. Like every other learning lesson was I'd run myself into a hole where I felt like I was just creeping on stage, just finally making it to the finish line with all the stimulants. So that's my approach, is kind of keep it as simple as possible, and don't project things out. You'll know when you need to use something. And start small. You don't have to go to the same dose you used last year. You might find you need less. And paying attention to your blood work and seeing, if your body's operating well and you're getting the results, don't get greedy and try to speed things up. So again, it's a really 16-week prep is still a marathon when you're doing it one meal at a time. So you got to manage fatigue. And I think that's what's improved the looks of myself and a lot of my clients is, like Paul will always say, don't look like you're walking out of a concentration work camp, kind of look fresh as best as you can. Look lively, look the part, like you're, a big muscular, healthy individual. We all know we don't feel that way sometimes, stepping on stage.
Yeah. I'm 8 weeks out now, and the days are long and the nights are short. It feels like moving through mud. How's
your sleep right now at 8 weeks?
So I sleep well. I'm a lifelong insomniac, but about 4 or 5 years ago, I started trazodone, and that's been a real game changer for me. So I sleep well, but my sleep has gotten shorter. I have energy through the day. This happened last prep too. I just got to a point where instead of my normal like 9 to 10 hours of sleep, I'm sleeping like 7 to 8 now, which is great. I have a lot more time in the day, but sleep's pretty good. Other than that, I can't sleep as long when I'm starving. I just wake up so hungry.
Yeah.
Feeling empty.
Yeah, it's a tough trick. There's only so much you can do. Have you ever tried any of the GLP-1 stuff?
Yeah. That's actually going to be my next question for you, whether you've used them in prep or not. I used semaglutide through last prep. It was very helpful. It actually helped my sleep a lot, but like I said, it just got to the point where I needed less sleep. And I actually got up to a pretty high dose. I think I was using like 2.5 milligrams a week, but it worked very well for me. And then this prep, my coach is having me use retatrutide. So I've been using that and I like it. It's definitely, I think the equivalent starting dose, like they start people on 1 milligram of semaglutide and they start people on 5 milligrams of retatrutide or tirzepatide. And I get a lot out of less if you equate the doses from retatrutide. But yeah, that's what I'm using now.
That's that's a good amount, because most people I start at like 2 milligrams of retatrutide.
Yeah, I'm using. That's what I started at too.
A little bit. Yeah, good. Yeah, they're definitely beneficial. I was one of those first people that were purists saying just suck it up. You learn to diet. You're gonna be hungry regardless. But I've come full circle on the point of it. Why not make things a little bit easier on your stress, on the food focus, so you can actually prioritize good in performance and putting a good package on stage.
Did you use it last year?
No, I only used it. So myself, I haven't used it on a show prep, but I used it right after my last show during the rebound, because I wanted to keep my physique a little tighter, and I didn't want to just be like, the ghrelin response kind of takes some time. So you could eat like a pig for 3 weeks and you're still going to be hungry, like
no matter what.
So, yeah, it's not like you're going to scratch that itch overnight when it comes to hunger. So I wanted to make sure I could control the rebound a little bit mentally with the food noise. So I used retatrutide, and I never got past I think it was 2.5 milligrams was the most I used. And I would just break that dosage up into 3 times a week, just Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Okay.
Because I noticed that helped with the kind of nausea feeling, after a bolus administration. So, but yeah, I've had some success with clients with it, quite a bit. A little goes a long way. And I've also seen their blood work in off seasons too, like after rebounds, just improve massively.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So I think there's going to be, I really have to admit, I think it really is going to be one of the drugs of the future is going to be some of these GLPs and like not just the GLPs, but the way that they're adding on glucagon and the GIP effects as well. And there's word that they're going to have ones that are going to help fight muscle wasting with maybe some IGF pathway that they're going to add into these compounds as well. But yeah, they're pretty successful. But the only downside I see with them so far is people become very reliant on them, and so you have to be careful because you want to manage your hunger sometimes through discipline and know the difference and not be reliant on administering a drug to tell you if you should be hungry or not. Because I need this biofeedback I do need as a coach to have some of that biofeedback as well. Not always just looking at the mirror saying, did the body want the food or not?
Absolutely.
So and I do think that you want to also maybe look into with certain people, there is like a little bit of a depression issue, I think, with GLP-1s. I think it was semaglutide that they did some studies on, and that chronic use of semaglutide was giving people depression, some sort of depression issues or serotonin issues or or whatnot. Colton had explained that to us one podcast. I'll have to get some information and maybe send it over to you if I find it there.
Yeah, I'd be very curious to look into that. Yeah. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So when people were coming off of it, they were having a little bit of like a depressive swings. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So for the wrong person, that could be the wrong match you're lighting. So you need to be careful.
Yeah. Yeah. I had to come off it very quickly after my show because we were doing a very aggressive rebound, which I kind of wish I hadn't done. I wish I had taken a more gradual approach, but I needed to eat so much food after the show because of how fast we were growing that I had to drop it pretty quickly.
Right.
But yeah, are there any other, you mentioned SLU, are there any other these newer peptides that you've been success with, either with clients or with yourself?
I've really starting to like some of these mitochondrial enhancers. So some that I've used, so what I've used personally myself, I can attest to is MOTS was something I used right after the show, and I used retatrutide. And then about, I think 8 weeks later in post-show, when we kind of moved to a little slower approach of like off-season, not rebound, I started using some of the SLU. But the MOTS seemed to just do a great job with blood sugar management for me as well. It was something that definitely helped manage my blood sugar, especially when carbohydrates were extremely high and they were going to stay high for a while. I found myself waking up with better glucose readings, having to use less insulin.
Interesting.
In general. So that one's been great. You get a little kick of energy too. Not like a stimulant, just gives you a little bit better focus.
Yeah.
And then I've been using, I'm not the biggest fan of methylene blue, but I kind of like it for just like a mental clarity. Yeah. So I've used that maybe like 10 milligrams a day for periods of times just to help me work really. I can't say I've seen much physical changes to that, but I think between MOTS and SLU, some people who have good metabolisms and are well disciplined in their diet could probably think about eliminating some of these stimulants for fat burners and start swapping those in and probably getting a healthier effect, sleeping better, looking better by the time they present themselves on stage, and then not having such like a big rebound after you come off of it. Because we all know you drop like these ECY stacks or ephedrine stacks, your hunger will just skyrocket back up and weight gain will just come right back up almost too aggressively. I don't see that rebound with some of these mitochondrial enhancers. They just seem to make everything work a little better. Food efficiency as well. But I've started to like those, and I hope there's more research that comes out on like stuff like the SLU because it's a little grim. Some of the information's really not there, for long-term usage. Hopefully we're not all the guinea pigs, but
yeah, I've tried all of those, and I'll say the one thing I didn't realize about methylene blue is you have to be very careful with it if you're taking an SSRI.
Yeah.
Because it can cause serotonin syndrome, which I think I experienced once, which was very intense. Basically felt like I was on like a super dose of Adderall and was like shaking. And so you really have to be careful with that.
Yeah.
If you are on any SSRI.
Yeah, especially stuff like people that use just for a forewarning to people, because that is real serotonin syndrome and it can be very dangerous. But there's also some people leverage like tesofensine, which mixing that with methylene blue, same scenario. Yeah, and certain SSRIs can definitely do that. So you got to be careful for sure.
Yeah. And then the one last thing I wanted to say on the my experience with semaglutide last year in prep is obviously it helps with hunger, but the main benefit I noticed is main two benefits. One was sleep, because it just felt like your blood sugar levels were stable. So you didn't have these crashes that wake you up in the middle of the night. And then also, everyone's experienced probably at some point when they're dieting this, like, you get this like urge to eat, not just like hunger, but like almost like a panic. And that went away too.
Yeah.
I think it's because your blood sugar levels are stabilized.
Yeah. Yeah. Now the semaglutide, does that have the GIP as well?
No.
Okay. Gotcha. That's the only part I don't like about some of those. You feel full awfully quick with like Retta. I don't know if you've noticed the difference between when you're using Sema versus the retatrutide, but it can be a little strong feeling. You feel like you fill up pretty quick.
Yeah.
Food wise.
Yeah. I didn't get the side effects from it. I know a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for some reason, it wasn't an issue for me. Even when I was like carbing up on, over 1,000 grams of carbs, I seemed to have no problem.
Good.
But yeah. Great. Well, Dave, last question for you. 5 years from now, where do you hope the Blue Collar brand will be, as well as your own physique?
Yeah. So for Blue Collar coaching, I mean, bodybuilding, we got big plans my wife and I are working on right now. So we want to just continue to progress the coaching business part itself and really continue to build a team. But honestly, we have goals that we've worked with Gasp and Better Bodies in the past. So we've kind of have a little background in clothing. We would love to do something like we're currently working right now on doing some, apparel for the company, kind of having it like actually like more of not just a coaching brand, but kind of an attitude that we bring to people. So we want to bring some clothing line into that as well. And I really want to bring back, I have a goal in 5 years or so. I could see us having a great website that actually has a big community forum base, like the old schools used to have. And I really would love to have that so everyone could go to our coaching, do all the typical consultations, signups, inquire about coaching, apparel. But I really loved growing up in bodybuilding, having that forum community scenario going on where everyone shared thoughts. Everybody got to hear everyone's wild and crazy thoughts about certain tactics. But then you also had a lot of people that bloomed that, I remember listening to John Meadows talk in different forums, listening to Justin Harris talk in different forums, and really having some of these golden nuggets of people that could just really share some information and have this community base. So that's part of my goal, is to just kind of let Blue Collar Bodybuilding eventually be a little hub where people can share thoughts. You can be at the first day of your fitness journey, or you could be a professional IFBB pro, just helping one another, because that's kind of actually how I started, was a lot of the forums. Like some of them were not very useful forums, but some of them were definitely useful for sure over time. Yeah. And then for myself, my biggest goal, to be honest, for competitive myself, is I would love to have my story with my wife and I. Her and I are very close, obviously, but we do a lot of this together, and we stepped onto our first bodybuilding stage together as amateurs. I would love to one day step on the stage as a pros together and say that that's the chapter 1 and then the last chapter of our book, at least. So if that's as far as we made it, I think that's a good goal within the next 5 years. So
absolutely.
But yeah, that's part of my plan, and I know her and I would really get some good joy out of that.
Yeah. I'm very excited for you. I'm sure it's going to happen, and it's only a matter of time. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Dave. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure the audience will love it too. Where can folks find you and follow along or reach out if they want to contact you? Yeah, best thing is our IG. It's at Mr._Mrs. Blue Collar Bodybuilding. And then also you can follow us on YouTube. We do a lot of everything from lives to Q&As. We do a lot of just kind of sharing our journey, like all of our shows, all of our bodybuilding shows that we've competed on are all recorded and put up into long format videos on YouTube. So you can just do Blue Collar Bodybuilding YouTube and reach out there if you guys need anything. Awesome. I'll have links to that. Thanks again, Dave. Appreciate it.